Hello. In the first video, The Beginner's Guide to Sabian Symbols, I just said what they were, who originated them, and gave some tips on how to move from a casual relationship, a playful relationship with them, towards considering whether you might want to study them and take more serious interest in this particular path of knowledge. Now, in part 2, today I'm going to talk about what you would do if you wanted to take it a little bit further. How would you use the Sabian symbols to your advantage? And there are several different ways in which you can use them, some of which I've actually gone into greater depth with and listed different videos which I'll refer to later in this program. But let's just look at the obvious thing. The first thing you do is you find out where your sun and your moon is, probably. And you'll look at the pages that have been written for the sun and the moon sign. The symbols are obscure. They're not logical. You need to use your intuition in order to get any meaning whatever from these symbols. However, that's not enough. It's simply not enough to approach them intuitively without some discipline of the rational mind. So the first thing we look at when we're studying Sabian symbols is that we have to find a balance within ourselves, within how we think, between the right brain and the left brain, between the intuitive and the rational. When you approach these symbols entirely intuitively, you might get something like the images of Ruby Fumiski, and you'll see all of these images on my website. I find her images really beautiful and somehow resonant with the felt, the feeling side of the symbols. It speaks to me very quickly. And yet, if I overcome a certain scholastic laziness and really think carefully about what has been written, and I approach the analysis of these symbols very seriously, then I get something more like perhaps the commentary on some of the pages by Richard Gray. His very particular analysis of these expressions of the Sabian symbols, these interpretations, is done within the 7-word system. Now, this 7-word system gives you a model for looking at anything very clearly, and he's an expert at this. So he's kind of picked apart all of the wisdom of the symbols and said, yeah, it seems to mean that, but look again, look deeper. It actually says that. And that's different. So if you actually want to, you can look in very great detail at the specifics. Why this phrase and not that phrase? In what way does Jones differ from Rudyard? Has James Burgess added anything different, or is he just paraphrasing what the two masters said in 21st century nomenclature? You can study it, and the two advantages of this, one is you'll understand it more deeply, of course, but the second advantage is that you'll learn how to study. You'll learn how to study esoteric teachings. Now, esoteric teachings are not the same as any other subject. When we study the mysteries, we must expect them to be a little bit mysterious. That's why they're called the mysteries. And there's a facility of mind, let's call it that, when presented with a veil, the facility to break through that veil, and the action of breaking through the veil of ambiguity, of confusion, of paradox, of opposite descriptions of the same principle which you just cannot understand. All of this is the veil that obscures our knowledge of the mysteries. That veil is meant to be there. It is written into all of the studying of the mysteries that I've ever done. It's all a little bit difficult to get until you get into the zone. And that zone, for me, is the best expression of how the mind is, how it feels, how it operates, when the balance between rational and non-rational wisdom is brought to bear. So the first and most obvious thing to suggest when you're studying the Sabian symbols is find that zone. Don't allow yourself to get all pink and fluffy and say, oh, love and goodness and unicorns, and, without actually examining, yes, but logic, words, specifics, trying to get that balance between the two ways of knowing anything. If you find that balance, then you'll move to a new dimension of consciousness, a mental attitude of openness, but not gullibility, analysis, but not paralysis. Without that state of mind, the symbols are simply, you're not going to get them. They're unavailable to you. So the beginner's guide to Sabian symbols is really taking us to the level where it's worth studying how to study them. This is what I'm talking about today. How do we move ourselves from that zone of balance between rational and non-rational towards the depth of the Sabian symbols? When you look at your sun position or your moon position, probably the sun is easier because sun represents consciousness and moon represents unconsciousness. So it's kind of obvious that you're going to identify more clearly the sun sign at first. When you look at the sun sign, then you'll see expressions which you may just totally not relate to at all. They may be meaningless to you. That's a good thing, not a bad thing. That's a good thing. Because as we begin to trust esoteric teachings, we develop faith. And faith, in the end, is a decision. It goes through a process of trusting and then having your trust validated. That deepens your confidence in your trust. Having your faith betrayed, that deepens your sense of where to apply caution. So we have to train ourselves to find out what faith is. And then we have to decide to employ it. Faith, trust, self-confidence, pretty much the same thing. Optimism, the same thing. If we approach Sabian symbols with faith, yes, this is meaningful to me. Yes, these work. Yes, I don't understand myself fully. This will help. If you approach Sabian symbols with that attitude, something in the mind breaks through the veil. You pull aside the veil of ignorance and mystery, and you get something else. If you have the confidence and trust that Sabians will reveal themselves to you, then something happens. So if we're studying the sun sign, maybe you see what could be, not what has been, but what could be. And for me, this is the greatest gift that I've received from my study of Sabian symbols. I've seen myself differently, and not in a bad way. I've somehow been given permission to think more of myself, because it's the written word, and the written word acts as an authority. If Jones and Rudyard say, look, anyone born on this day is going to have this challenge, this potential, this opportunity, I believe them. So I'll see what I can do to live that out, to further it, to further myself in that direction. In my case, I was given the symbol 16 Taurus, an old man trying to reveal the mysteries to people in vain. Sign of frustration, in a sense. But Rudyard actually explained it differently. Creative frustration is a good thing. Old wisdom isn't useful in special times. Times have changed, like now. The world is in crisis. We need new wisdom. The old wisdom has brought us here, and we're not happy with where we are. The old wisdom isn't okay. It did not serve us fully. It may have served us as a plank, a platform, a springboard to where we are now, but it didn't do the job because the world's in a mess. Obviously, that wisdom wasn't good enough. So somebody with my degree is saying, okay, I'll see if I can come up with a another one. I'll reinterpret the old wisdoms and see if I can say something that might work. I don't expect other people to go along with me. That's not the point. The point is for me to work it out for myself. So the Sabian Symbols has unlocked something that was hidden within me, and I think this is true generally. I found it from many of my clients. They need someone to say, yes, you have that potential. It is written. It is written. I can see you could be a healer. You could be a teacher. You're going to work well in the area of communication. I can see children might be what you want to do. Oh yeah, creativity is strong in your chart. You can give a keyword like those that I've listed there, and somehow the client expands into that word if you choose the right word. And I think these Sabian symbols give us that possibility. They're very specific. They do choose words very carefully indeed, and I don't find them irrelevant ever. I have found clients to deny them, but I can see that's not a good idea. They really shouldn't deny it. They should accept that if they're to go further. And those denials usually are emotional, which gives a clue as to the lack of neutrality in the situation. Insofar as we can awaken our own self-understanding and through that develop what would otherwise have remained unfulfilled potential, we can do this for another person. Especially if we're acting as astrologers. Somebody comes to us and we give them a little bit of a Sabian Symbols reading, just maybe their sun sign, for example, and we can understand that what behavior we're seeing from them is a blind, half-blind, stumbling attempt to realize a potential, which is indicated clearly by the Sabian Symbols, but is still vague, more of a feeling and intuition, unresolved, never recognized within them. So, as Sabianologists, if I can use that word, we are able to implant in the mind of another person the possibility of a potential that they haven't realized, and indicate compassionately an awareness that we have of their struggle, what they might have seen as failures in life, are exercises in trial and error, stumbling towards uncovering this mystery which the Sabian Symbols can reveal. So I have found it, generally speaking with astrology, very meaningful to notice that people are different. It's a very silly and simple cliche, isn't it? Everyone is different from everyone else. But I didn't know that. I had to learn that. My father made it really clear that there was only one way to be, and that was like him. And if I wasn't like him, I was wrong. I believed that. And I don't think I'm the only one to be trained to think that there's a way to do things a right way, and then there's every other way, which is a wrong way, including your way. Now, Sabians go even further than mainstream astrology in saying, no. Each and every one of us is very different indeed. And what is a good thing for one person is a bad thing for another person. That's how it is. And Sabians make that so clear, so very clear indeed. So when we're engaging with another person, a client perhaps, on this level, we can just see that everything that they've got going on can be explained within the Sabian context very well indeed. And positively, we can find a positive spin for every single feeling and behavior and confused thoughts and silly idea. We can say, oh yeah, this is your Venus speaking. Oh, that could be your Mercury square Mars having a little bit of fun there. You know, we can actually find an interpretation that's pleasing to them. That's a real gift. That really is. Now, one more point I can make. If you really take this seriously, to the point where you're reading a symbol, it means nothing to you. You just can't relate to it at all. And instead of ignoring it, throwing it away, do the very opposite. Take the time that you need to take to study this one more deeply, because this is the one that's got the most potential benefit for you. We're all unfolding, all awakening, bit by bit. We're all just trying to be a bit better than we were last year. The greatest acceleration in that process of growth is found when we identify not a good bit that we can improve, no, but a bad bit that we can reverse. A bad bit is a bit a bit judgmental, but if we find a problem area in our lives, something that we just cannot see, it's obviously to do with our shadow side. So if we can find that, bring some light onto the shadow, then the potential for self-development is greater. I think this is probably truer with Saturn than other planets, perhaps. For me, it certainly was, and I found a great deal of reluctance to follow my Saturn wisdom, which has to do with religious ceremony, and I was against it. I just didn't like doing that kind of thing at all. But then I saw my Sabian symbol really underline the fact that that would be appropriate for me to carry out this ritual behavior in the context of religion. And I did. I took it on. I looked into that. I studied that, and I started to do religious rituals, sacred rituals. And I actually found it very joyful, very expansive indeed. And I found another part of myself which I had never even dreamt existed. None of my friends would have thought that was me at all. But it was me. It was a part of me. And I got fully into it because of the authority that the Sabian Symbols had given me. Yes, that will be your kind of thing. I believed that, and it was, very surprisingly. So I think you can look for that across the range of Sabian Symbols. Well, I have seen it with the sun sign. Most people can identify with their sun signs, but I found people who can't. And yet, in each case, I think they should. That would be good for them if they did. Now, of course, one other facility we have with the Sabian Symbols is the facility of divination. It's worth making a separate video about that whole subject, and perhaps I'll do that. But briefly speaking, you can randomly pick one of the 360 degrees and study it. And if you do this in a certain manner, then you'll find it gives you the kind of advice that you might need in the moment. I don't think you should do that very often. Once a day seems too much to me. Once a week even, hard to take it that seriously, that special. But if you did it when needs must, when a situation is presenting itself to you, and you have a decision to make, then it's like the I Ching or something similar. The rune stones, you cast the oracle, and you get some insight. It appeals mainly, of course, to the intuitive side. So, there's a little bit further advanced study of the Sabian Symbols for you. If you want to go into more detail about rectification, that's if you have an imprecise or unknown birth time, I've done a video on that. That's another use of the symbols. I've done a video on how to deepen your intuition and to find out who am I, the big life question, who am I? I've done separate videos on that, and I think I might do one on the oracle at some point. Thanks for watching. Bye.